Before the second coming.
Welcome back to Nightchild Reviews. Fresh from the baptism of fire that was Prince's experience of opening for the Rolling Stones in October 1981, Prince and his new band lineup began their momentous Controversy tour on 20th of November 1981. The tour was essentially divided into two legs, with the first stretching from November 1981 until the beginning of January 82, and then resuming at the end of January until mid-March. Andre Simone had departed the group, heading for his own solo career, and was replaced by bass player Brown Mark. The building blocks of greatness were beginning to pull together, with Prince's developing stagecraft, work ethic, and an ever-expanding repertoire of tracks, which now included his latest album Controversy, which was released to coincide with the tour's start in autumn 1981. Prince now had the luxury of the big band ballads that would ultimately become a focal point of his tours, with tracks such as Do Me Baby now available for selection. Prince also had another ace up his sleeve with his opening act, The Time. This pairing, however, didn't come without its issues, as we shall see. The funk band Zapp and Roger also opened for Prince at times, squeezing between The Time and Prince's performance, and their story is probably worth a whole video to themselves at some point. The show saw Prince really start to place importance on the visual aesthetic aspect of his shows, with stage designer Roy Bennett developing an elaborate set which at the time, according to Pierre Nilsson in his excellent book Prince, The First Decade, cost a rather, for the early 1980s, significant amount of $45,000 to create. The set featured Venetian blinds, which according to Bennett were used because of the sexual suggestion, you look through the blinds. A catwalk was included, and a fire pole, which would become even more famous when utilised in the not-too-distant future recording of the seminal 1999 video. According to Bennett, once again quoted in Pierre Nilsson's book, it had been suggested to Prince to use the image of naked female figures featuring the stage props and guitar stands, and to somehow project the film onto the audience from the back of the stage. Prince, however, rejected the ideas due to a concern with women's rights. One of the most intriguing aspects of these shows was that Prince began toying with the idea of releasing a live-action concert movie using footage from the Controversy tour. Prince asked Chuck Statler to begin work on a project tentatively named The Second Coming. And it is here, if I may, that I would like to quickly quote, if you will forgive me, well, myself, and play a part of the video I created 2 years ago, briefly discussing this tantalising project. As so often in the Prince world, an initial idea morphed into a much more elaborate project. Director Chuck Statler, who worked on the Times Cool video, was brought in to record footage of the Controversy tour and to create, essentially, a promotional tool that would show Prince's stage magnificence to the wider world. It was originally the plan to create a live record using a performance in March 1982 at the Met Center, Minnesota. Alongside the live tracks, a studio cut named The Second Coming was considered to be part of the release. The Second Coming track was a choired gospel number with Prince's powerful a cappella declaring that the Second Coming would not be long, and asked how many good men must die before there's gun control, something clearly on Prince's mind on the Controversy album and after the assassination of John Lennon. After viewing the initial footage, Prince was delighted and felt the project should become much more elaborate. Prince decided he wanted to turn the recordings into a drama documentary and even giving it a full theatrical release. The idea to have little acted out scenes between the songs soon had Prince transfixed, and endless scenes of Prince and Susan Moonsey and Kim Upshur toying around were shot. Chuck Statler recalls that they filmed endless hours and hours in a marathon 2 to 3 day session. Prince wasn't clear about what he required, and even though Statler thought he had sufficient footage, Pierre Nilsson, in the excellent Dance Music Sex Romance book, makes clear Prince's demands as he quotes Statler recalling Prince's retort, "I'll tell you when we have it. You don't tell me when we have it." Prince's boundless desire for perfectionism and control was evident from these early days. It's important to remember that Prince wasn't a huge star at this point, and he was incredibly focused on how to carefully create the exact image he desired to portray. The possible film could reach audiences that his concerts may not have, and in many ways this can be seen as a first schooling in the ideas of film creation that would bear bountiful fruit when in just 2 short years Purple Rain would launch Prince into the stratosphere. After working so frenetically on the footage, which Statler states included a lot of Prince's exposing his bikini briefs and trench coat, Prince suddenly lost interest. It was rumoured that his impatience to begin recording with Vanity 6 quickly became his new focus, and the project was promptly abandoned. Statler at the time had not been paid, But in an interesting development, Statler gave an interview to Wax Poetics magazine in which it was made clear that the footage must have remained on Prince's mind, because decades later, around 2007, Prince contacted Statler and worked out a deal for Prince to buy the live performance footage, but Prince didn't mention the dramatic acting scenes. Statler later found these and contacted Prince without reply. Their last conversation, Statler was left with the impression that Prince was uneasy with the sexual nature of the footage. Statler still owns the dramatic scenes, but states he cannot release them due to licensing issues. I just wonder if this is the end of the story, or if another chapter has still yet to be added. Whilst the project is incomplete and nowhere near finished, it would provide a fascinating snapshot of a time when Prince was formulating his image as he approached the cusp of stardom. The Controversy Tour itself saw Prince give concerts usually lasting around 70 minutes, and a typical set list would include an opening, after the Second Coming intro, of Uptown and the rousing Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad, often followed by Prince's widely appreciated hit of I Want to Be Your Lover. This then moved into a more adult section of Head, Dirty Mind and the luxurious seduction of Do Me Baby. Head saw Prince riding out the groove for an extended jam, eventually climaxing, masturbating his guitar into submission. Prince was already expertly toying with the crowd with lines during Head such as, Are you just going to sit there and watch? The show returned with the track Controversy and Prince reenacting a crucifixion pose before a raucous version of Let's Work with Des and Prince wrestling for control of a microphone, before the show partied out with a firestorm version of Jack You Off or Party Up. Sometimes a very punk-like version of Annie Christian, which utterly reinterpreted the track, made an appearance, as did Sexuality. The burning sexuality of the track Head was causing concern for Des Dickerson, who asked for it to be removed from the show due to its content, which must have been even more difficult and excruciating when his family attended the Met Centre concert. I want to quickly thank Pierre Nilsson for the remarkable contribution he has made to this era through his book, which is really stunning in its detail, and the link for that book is below. What was clear watching footage from these concerts is that Prince was truly putting in the work in terms of developing not only his musicianship, but his confidence was simply astronomical, and you can clearly see so many signs of techniques, such as his call and response shouts and sustained dramatic concert lighting effects that would play a big part in upcoming tours. In so many ways, Prince had clearly studied the way he held himself, his guitar poses, his swagger, his groove riding and his vocal delivery. Although compared to the early Dirty Mind tour, Prince was somewhat, by his standards at least, slightly more conservatively dressed with his white shirt and black tie, it was clear also that Prince's band had been drilled ruthlessly to know each moment inside out. It's interesting to see that development of an artist through sheer hard work and talent, not relying on pyrotechnics or stage trickery, but predominantly honing his craft and shining his talent. Des Dickerson also noted the crowd demographics were changing, with around 30% of their audience now being white. There seemed to be very little in the way of Prince becoming a much bigger star fairly shortly. It just needed a certain undefinable something, possibly a couple of mass appeal hits, the launch of a more visual era with MTV, a moment of undeniable zeitgeist. This was all shortly to come. Prince's relationship, sadly, however, with the time reached a very strained point when at the final concert of the tour on March 14th, 1982 in Cincinnati, Ohio, a food fight fracas developed between the two groups, with Prince throwing eggs at the time whilst they performed, and even abducting Jerome Benton and dragging him off to the dressing room. Jesse Johnson ended up handcuffed to a wall. The issue came to a head as the time were warned not to retaliate in any way during Prince's performance. However, as soon as Prince's performance wrapped up, chaos and disorder ruled the day, and the food began to fly, causing some significant cleaning bills to be racked up. And, to add insult to injury, Morris Day was blamed by Prince for the mess and had to settle those bills. Prince, however, had served his apprenticeship on stage and was now poised for the big time. He had just the small matter of creating an extraordinary, defining statement with his new upcoming double album 1999 and the Triple Threat Tour. For now, however, Prince had blown the roof off increasingly large venues and was being noted as a force to be reckoned with Newsweek declaring Prince to be the most exciting new star in pop music today, a prophet of sexual anarchy. Prince was ready to set the world on fire with his next project. Thank you.